Welcome and good evening, everyone, to the August 24th edition of the Edina Planning Commission meeting. Carrie, if you could please take roll call.
Commissioner Bennett. Here. Commissioner Hamilton. Here. Commissioner Olson. Here. Commissioner Nemiroff. Here. Commissioner Strauss. Here. Commissioner Lee. Here. Commissioner Hobbs.
Here.
Commissioner Kimavaki.
Here.
Commissioner Ma.
Here.
Chair Platiger.
Here. So tonight we have, first up is approval of the meeting agenda. So there are three things, 2 public hearings tonight and 1 sketch plan review on that. Are there any additional adds or deletions to the meeting agenda? Nope. With that, I'd take a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
Move approval.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next up is approval of the meeting minutes. These are the minutes from the July 27th meeting of the Planning Commission. Are there any changes or updates to that? Hearing none, I'd take a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So next up are 2 public hearings. The first is a public hearing for a variance request at 6511 Ridgeview. And I'm assuming, Carrie, you'll be doing that tonight since you're here.
For Chris this
Chris,
evening.
gotcha.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Our first variance request is on Ridgeview Circle, located at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's the property highlighted in blue. Existing single-family home located on the property at the end of the cul-de-sac. The required front setback is established by the homes on either side. So based on the front setback of the 2 homes adjacent to this property, a 36-foot setback is required. The existing home today is set back 33 feet, so it's an existing non-conforming home. They would like to build an entry at the front portion of the house into the required setback. This graphic here that's highlighted indicates that front entryway addition that's proposed for the variance. This graphic indicates the existing home as it exists today. As you can see, it's a 2-story. The practical difficulty for them is the location of the house as it exists is a nonconformity, but the functionality of the house, the front door is only separated by 3 feet to the stairwell. So as you can see, as you come in, that front entry door nearly clips the stairs as they go up. So it's a bit of a nuisance for the existing homeowner. So what they would like to do is bump out that front entry. There's an existing bathroom that they would be expanding out to the front also. So that's the variance that's before the Planning Commission this evening. As you can see, this is a graphic illustration of what that would look like. These are the adjacent homes, somewhat similar to the existing home. So in this case, I'm looking at the variance criteria. Staff believes that the variance criteria is met. The practical difficulty is the existing location of the home that doesn't meet that required front setback. The request is reasonable to gain access into the entry. It's reasonable given the existing constraints of the home. Also, the addition fits the character of this neighborhood. It's, again, a small addition out the front. With that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions outlined in your staff report, and I can stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for Carrie? Commissioner Nemiroff?
Hi, Carrie. Is there any impact on trees with this project?
I don't believe there's any impact to trees, no. Jackie did make it.
Could you close the back door? Could you close the door? There any other questions for planner team? Okay, thanks, Carrie. Would the applicant like to come forth and say anything? No, we just appreciate your If you could come up to the microphone, please, so we get you on tape and everything, if you could
Yeah,
tell
sure.
us.
So
tell-
Byron Olson, I'm a homeowner. Appreciate your consideration on this. Certainly something we've lived with for about 20 years. When we have guests over, we stand on the first or second stair as they come in and out of the house. So
Finally got tired of it, huh?
yeah, it's kind of getting tired of that. And we did include it in our packet as a signature by all but 2 people who weren't home. So we've talked to all our neighbors and they're in favor of it as well. So
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Should have asked that. Guess not. Okay. So this is a public hearing, so if anyone wants to come forth, you can come to one of the side microphones or to the middle if you have material to show. If you want to come up, you'll get 3 minutes at the microphone, and there'll be a red, yellow, green on there as you go through. Seeing none, I take a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries on closing the public hearing. So I'll take it up to the planning commission. Any comments, questions, motions?
I have one. In the staff report, there's a staff recommendation to approve the requested variance. Are there any staff findings, like an engineering department finding or anything that is associated with this project?
There's not, just that addition out the front. There won't be any significant grading that'll go along with this project.
Thank you. Any other comments? It seems fairly reasonable to me.
I move approval of the variance as out, subject to conditions outlined in the staff memo.
So I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, comments? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Congrats. So next up is a public hearing request for 5812 Hidden Lane. And again, Planner Teague will take us through that one.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So this next variance is for a tear-down rebuild. Again, the property on Hidden Lane. It's a corner lot, as you can see here. The front setbacks are established by the homes adjacent to it. So 5808 establishes the setback along this frontage. The new home would meet that setback. The home to the north establishes the setback along this street frontage. This home here to the north, 5821, was a recent tear-down rebuild. The home that was there before had a 41-foot setback. The new house is set back another 10 feet. It has a 51-foot setback. So as you can see in the picture here, they've moved it quite a ways back onto the property, which impacts the lot to the south. So that's the practical difficulty that's been caused here. This graphic indicates the yellow is the existing home and the dark is the proposed home. This is a single-story home that's proposed, and we'll take a look at some elevations in a minute. But note, the proposal is to meet the existing setback to Dundee Road. So this is the existing setback at 37.8 feet, and the new home would match that setback, so it's essentially the same. Some of the reasoning for bringing it out to the street and not pushing it back into the lot, one, there's quite a large maple tree located right here they would like to save, and with the new home in meeting all the city and the watershed districts grading and drainage requirements, they're creating this rain garden in the back and in the front. And also, being a corner lot, they'd like to maintain as large of an area as possible for the family to enjoy out the back. There are a couple of trees that would be impacted, that would be removed. We believe they're within that construction zone, so they would not need to be replaced. Anything beyond that 10 feet, they would have to replace. So this is a look at the proposed home. As you can see, it's a single-story home. A couple of renderings here. So the graphic on the right here is the proposed home. On the left here, that's that existing home to the north that sets the setback. So as you can see, that's a two-story home, and the new home, being single-story, would be shorter. This is the home that we saw on the screen earlier to the right. This graphic's a little bit misleading. This is a two-story home. We'll see a picture in a minute, but it kind of gives the appearance of a single-story home. This is that home to the east, I guess it is, and then this is the home to the north. So in looking at the variance criteria, again, staff believes that the variance criteria are met. Practical difficulty is that new home that was recently constructed that requires any new home to be set further back into the lot. We believe that the proposal to meet the existing setback is reasonable. It's kind of been a planning commission practice in the past for tear down rebuilds where variances are needed to at least match that existing setback of the home that's being put back. And so again, staff believes that that's reasonable. It does fit the character of the neighborhood. Again, it's just a single-story home, and they're protecting that large maple tree in the back. So with that, staff is supportive of the variance, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your staff report, and I can stand for questions.
Thanks, Kerry. Any questions for Commissioner Hobbs?
Carrie, I'm just curious, what's the age of the existing home?
Ooh, that I don't know. We can look that up and I can get it to you.
I mean, it's really just more a curiosity than anything. I mean, at least it looks as though it's a home that is relatively new in terms of being updated and contemporary in terms of its size and everything else. So it's just more than anything curiosity to me that it's something that is motivating somebody to tear it down and replace it.
Yeah, surprisingly, we've seen homes that were built 10, 15 years ago that are being torn down. So you never know. Sometimes they're old, sometimes they are relatively new.
Yeah. Thanks.
Quick question, Kerry. So the home to the north that's kind of causing this, is that was, how old a home is that?
That was just a few years ago.
Okay, so what did they run into with their setback then? Was that where they were supposed to be?
So their setback was established by this existing home to the south. So
Right.
they just needed to meet that 37-foot setback.
Oh, okay, so they went
But
well
they decided to
beyond. I
move
got
it.
you. Okay,
Right.
gotcha. Okay. Any other questions for Kerry?
I
Commissioner
do
Nemmer?
want to
Oh,
note that the applicant has provided a graphic that was handed out with some signatures from the adjacent property owners that are supportive of the request.
So one or two slides ago, Carrie, it showed the trees being cut down. It looks like a net of 6 trees being cut. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Yes.
Are they going to be replaced or just?
Those would not have to be replaced under our current code because it's within the construction limits. You get 10 feet beyond.
Okay.
Some of these are questionable. Again, it would be looked at the time of a building permit. If these are outside of that 10-foot zone, they would have to replace them.
So does our statute just kind of encourage people to make the zone bigger so they don't have to replace trees, or?
No, it's 10 feet from the
It's 10 feet from the foundation.
foundation.
Yeah,
correct.
so the bigger the foundation, then. Okay.
I guess you could argue that, but
Huh?
it's
Okay, thank you.
not the intent, but I guess it could happen. Anything else for Kerry? Oh, thanks. Would the applicant like to come and say anything? Certainly. Can have whoever you want.
I've got my whole neighborhood here.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm Nate with St. Elevation Homes, here on behalf of our client, John and Heidi Hempel. And essentially, I just wanted to point out, first of all, I thought Kerry and his staff have done a great job of analyzing the project and the variance request. A couple things characteristically of the neighborhood. If you look at, there's a diagram in your packet that shows the adjacent homes that are corner lots. And I don't know, can we get this up on the screen?
Yeah, he'll have
In
to
the-
give
in
you
the
the
s- in the
microphone,
square.
and then you can zoom in on the screen there also.
Sure. So the subject site is by my index finger, and the property to the north, which we were referring to at 5821, is the unique shape piece of the puzzle here, as you look at the two blocks that are adjacent to each other. And essentially all the other corner lots have an average setback of 20 feet. Our current setback is 37, and we're requesting 37 instead of the 51 feet. So our request is almost twice the amount of the average setback of the adjacent corner lots. So I just wanted to point that out. So in terms of the anomaly, we would be conforming more to the adjacent properties that are corner properties than we would be becoming something that would be different from everybody else. So unfortunately, the shape of this property is what has resulted in the setback issue. It's not something that we created. And then in terms of, somebody asked about the renovation piece. So our clients had looked at renovating this house, actually had spent about a year designing a new, or basically renovating, and they came to the conclusion from a cost perspective and a lifestyle perspective that it was more feasible for them actually to build new than it was for them to renovate that property. The property was built, I believe, in the late 1950s. And the other thing that I just wanted to point out in terms of the trees, one of the things that comes up with trees in general is that the ordinance obviously suggests what needs to be replaced and what doesn't need to be replaced. We'll have a landscaping plan that goes along with this, and obviously we'll meet the tree requirements that need to be replaced. But the garage and setback has nothing to do locationally with the trees that are being removed. So the position of the garage has nothing to do with the trees in general.
All right, any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Lee?
These are actually just design questions. So it looks like the main entrance is still going to face the same side of the street, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the walkway, it leads to the front door?
That's correct.
Typically, do guests park along that street, right in front of the house?
I'm going to let them answer.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. Sure, sure. So I was looking at the entry sequence from the garage. I don't know if you're going to receive guests through the garage, but you might want to consider a walkway that links somewhere from the garage to your front door, because I do think that is a nice front entry, and I think I was looking at the sequence. You'd be entering through the garage? Oh, there will be a walkway. Okay. Okay, okay. And you could actually eliminate that entire front walk right out to the street if you, I don't know if you are, but it still shows on some of the design going straight out to the street.
The intent was to keep that front sidewalk approach just for neighbors in case somebody would approach on that side, but
Oh, okay, so there is a sidewalk. I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was a sidewalk.
Yeah, there is a sidewalk.
Okay.
Most of our neighbors have that too, kind of a common theme for the corner lot.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize there was sidewalks. I've seen them where they go straight to the curb, and as if the car is going to stop right there and let off passengers, so that was my question. Yeah. That was my only question. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thanks. So this is a public hearing. If anyone wants to come up to one of the microphones, come up and say what you want and get 3 minutes. I would point out, as I believe Carrie or somebody mentioned before, we have a petition with, or a variance application with 12 neighbors saying they approve this that are in our hands too, so just for the record. All right, seeing none, I take a motion to close the public. Okay. somebody came up.
Hi there. I'm Jens Jorgensen. I'm the owner of the abnormal North Lot.
They
really,
pointed you out, huh?
What's that?
They all pointed you out.
I know. And I'm in favor of the variance, and for a number of reasons. But one, as you go down that road, I don't have it conforms to kind of the curve of the neighborhood. I feel the way it is now, and pushing it back that extra, however many feet is really going to make it look, as much as you think ours is pushed back, but it comes around that curve as kind of a normal progression. And then the other thing is the tree in the back, which is a beautiful maple tree that we really enjoy as well. So,
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Now I'd take a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. So bringing it back up to the Planning Commission for any comments, suggestions. To me, it seems fairly straightforward. They're staying with the existing setback, so it's still non-conforming, just like it was or is today. Commissioner.
I move to approve variance subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So I did want to say that it is very helpful. I think we've been getting more consistently these comparisons graphically, overlaying the existing house footprint over what they want to do. I think that highlighted colored map was very, very helpful. The other one is to see side by side from a street level the heights of the roofs as they relate to the neighbors. And the third thing was to see the applicant actually approach their neighbors. I know it's not all about balancing the neighbor, what the neighbor wants versus the homeowner, but it sure makes it much easier to approach this from our side when we know that you've done your homework. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. So next up is community comment. This is a time where you can come up and spend 3 minutes at one of the microphones telling us your thoughts. The only thing I would say, if there's something on the agenda tonight, please don't speak to that. Are there anyone that wants to come up for community comment? Nope. I'd take a motion to close community comment.
Motion to close public comment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. So next up are reports and recommendation. The first one up is a sketch plan review at 6600 France Avenue. So just for everyone be aware of a sketch plan review. This is where a developer may bring in a project to get some early information, early reading on the project. It's not a public hearing, so there will be back and forth between the applicant and the planning commission just on general things about the property, kind of what we're seeing with what they're asking, to give them some idea if it's worth coming back with their presentation to do a whole formal approval. If they would come back, it would all be, per the city process. It would come here for a public hearing. It would also go to city council for a public hearing and all the steps that would happen in between normally. So it's just meant to understand what they may be wanting to propose and see if it has any, legs within what the city is looking for. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So this property is located at 6600 France. It's just west of Southdale. It's the Southdale Office Center site. It is all one parcel from 66th all the way down to 69th. It's just under 22 acres in size. The site is currently zone planned Office District 2. It's guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential. It's that OR designation. Even though there's no residential on the site currently, this is an area that the comp plan outlined 10 years ago that was potential for high density housing. The site also has a 4-story height maximum to it that was established in the comp plan back in 2008, despite the fact that there are a 7 and a 6-story building on the site today. So what they're proposing to do is a multi-phase project. So to take you through the site, first phase would be the Bank of America project that was approved with site plan and variances not too long ago. That construction will start soon. The first phase of this new project would be 2 single-story retail, potentially 2-story here, along France Avenue. So that would be phase 2 if you considered Bank of America phase 1. Phase 2 or 3 would be the 6-story medical office building along West 66th Street. The next phase would be the removal of the existing office buildings that are located in this general area, and it would be a 6-story hotel or office, depending on what the market would be at that time, years out. Then the last phase would be potentially an 8-story residential tower, be about 70 units in there. So to accommodate this request, a comprehensive plan amendment would be required to increase that height from 4 stories to 8 stories, which would be that residential component. And we're suggesting a rezoning from planned office district to planned unit development, where we would create a zoning district over this entire site. In looking at some of the city code requirements, using the existing zoning, the 2 things stand out. Again, it's that height going to 8 stories, where the current zoning and comprehensive plan is 4 stories and 48 feet. Also, most significantly, the floor area ratio requirement for that site is currently 0.5. At full build out, this would be at 0.82, so it's nearly doubling the density of the site. So in looking at, when the applicant first came in, we were talking about the greater Southdale area principles, and they have designed this with this idea in mind. So this is the framework vision plan. As you can see, this is the site right here. We didn't specifically plan this entire area. That is part of the consultant that created this, is including that segment in their next version of the work. They're working on that now. But as you can see, we were planning pedestrian and vehicle connections into the site here. And the applicant has taken that theme and ran with it. They've divided it out into blocks, essentially, so you would have vehicular and pedestrian traffic through the site in a couple of locations where the red arrows are indicating. They're also proposing a sidewalk around the entire perimeter of the site. As we've talked about a lot in the with that Southdale area study, and that's trying to get that 50-foot setback from the street to the buildings. And that's exactly what this plan does here. They've established that 50-foot setback from the buildings to the curb to provide sidewalk in that green area. So this graphic kind of illustrates that 50-foot. This was the Bank of America building that will be under construction soon. Just to take you through just a couple of renderings, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant that will provide a little more detail. But again, most significantly here for your discussion is the consideration of that increase in height to 8 stories, increase in density. To provide a little parameter around that, the Greater Southdale area study, that plan contemplates about 80 units an acre over the entire Southdale area site. Obviously, this isn't a very dense residential proposal. But we are also considering increasing our floor area ratios probably up to 1 for our office properties that are currently at a 0.5 FAR. So with that, I think I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have, and the applicant will give a little more detail to the project as part of their presentation.
Any questions for Carrie? Commissioner Olson?
Thanks. Carrie, so you said that today that there's buildings over 4 stories on site. How did that happen?
Yeah, when this area developed, we didn't have any height restrictions.
Okay.
established height was a function of setback. So if you had a large lot like this and you could move the building away from the street, you could build a 10-story building. So I think that explains a 7-story building that's located here. That would have required about an 80-foot setback from here, and then the existing 6-story also. So again, it was about 2008 after the comprehensive plan where we lowered our height standards.
And so when that happened, did you look at this site or, think about what, that was the intent for it to always be 4 stories when the comp plan went through?
That's an excellent question. We didn't, see if I have maybe this graphic will work. When that was established, the council was pretty set on all of the property on the west side of France, so it's kind of highlighted in this pink area here, that office residential designation. The council thought this entire area should have a height no taller than 4 stories or 48 feet as kind of a transitional area into the single-family residential area further west. That same thinking held true on the east side of York, along this side, where a 4-story limit was established at that time also. So we didn't really, we considered site by site, but that was the general thinking that went into that.
And that's what the council decided. So the heights didn't come in as original comp plan. That's what at the end, that's what the city council, or a couple people in the city council put on for height limitations.
Yeah, the recommendation from the planning commission was very different.
Yeah, so just FYI. Commissioner Hamilton?
Can you help folks understand, I used to live back there, so I'm pretty familiar with that section, but can you help people understand what that section looks like between the proposed development and the single family across Valley View? I think the city has done there was some really good planning that was done many, many years ago, and it's been maintained.
Yeah, so maybe this graphic shows it. So this is all single-family development here to the west. There is a buffer along Valley View here there's a fence all along here and mature landscaping that provides a pretty good buffer to that neighborhood.
And a fairly high berm.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Is that city land?
This area here is.
So the city owns a buffer then?
Well, I don't know if it looks like it's part of the right of way.
Or part of the right of way?
Yep.
Either way, it's.
Yep,
Yeah.
but there is a pretty significant green space buffer there.
Any other questions for Carrie? Commissioner Nemero?
Carrie, in the staff report, it says, for example, parking setback front, 66th Street, 0 feet. Could you show me that on the, I don't know if this is the right.
Yeah, it's an existing condition.
You had another image that was, yeah.
Yeah, so it would be along here.
There'll be parking there?
Yes. Yep, this parking extends up into here. No? Again, those details of the site plan, we're really looking
Not
more
today, it
big
doesn't.
picture here.
Okay, and then Bank America, just a question. I mean, I'm looking again where the ATM drive-through is, and I remember we had some discussions about putting it behind the property, but that was going to get in the way of traffic flow. I suppose now it would be in that where that it probably would be encroaching where that proposed retail 1F, 1 floor building is, I suppose. Is that correct?
Right, the ATM is going in this location.
But if it had been gone behind the bank, it would be in the where the retail is.
Yes.
And then where it is now, and I understand there'll be a walking path around. Is there any concern about people walking through an ATM?
It could be a question for the applicant, but the sidewalk will go right alongside the ATM. They had to do some creative landscaping and retaining wall work in order to get that in, but it will be right adjacent to the ATM.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lee?
Carrie, for PUD, is for this entire parcel? We're considering it?
The PUD would be for the
Okay, so
entire
this is
parcel.
one proposal, and it's showing that the only portion that's actually potentially going to be 8 stories is that residential tower. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right now? But yet, what we're saying is that should anyone want to build on this or change from this plan, anywhere on that site, it could go up to 8 stories. Is that correct?
Well, with the PUD, let's just fast forward and say this were to all be approved, we would be approving this specific plan. So it wouldn't necessarily
You couldn't
mean
switch
that
those
you-
around.
Right, so it would be an amendment to the PUD.
You'd have to come back.
Right, so any change to the approved master development plan is essentially an amendment to that zoning district, where we're amending that master plan for the whole site.
Based on this proposal?
That's the starting point.
Okay,
correct.
so if this proposal were not to move forward, what would be the zoning on this property?
Planned office district as it is
It would
today.
remain. So the only reason we're considering it is because there is a proposal before us and they have to adhere to this proposal as we're reviewing it now, or seeing it now. Is that right?
What?
What I just want to be sure of is that we're not changing the designation from POD2 to PUD, and later on down the road, we have a bunch of 8-story, because that's the limit, now, so then many other 8-story structures could go on there potentially?
They'd
Is
have to
that-
come back and get the PUD done.
Right,
Again,
and there will be an established.
They don't get carte blanche to, once this is set, every building's the height it's gonna be. They can't go beyond that without coming back to the city.
Right, and there's a floor area ratio maximum that would be established, whatever that number
All
may
those
be.
go along with the parcel at that point.
Right.
The massing, the FAR, all that goes along with the parcel.
So in essence, it's not really changing the zoning. It's all going to remain POD2, but this is an amendment specifically to a PUD just for this proposal.
No, we would the site is
rezoned.
currently zoned planned office district.
Okay.
So if they're to move forward with this project, they would come in and request a rezoning of the entire site to PUD. We would then write essentially a new zoning ordinance specifically for this site that would establish setbacks, height, floor area ratio, parking requirements. It would all be written into that new ordinance for the site.
And then if the development, because this is actually, it is fairly well developed, but things can always change. If their numbers changed and something had to be an 8-story here in addition to, an 8-story there, say the hotel or office now needs to be 8-story to make it feasible, what happens then?
It would be an amendment to the
Have to come
PUD.
back and get a PUD amendment.
So it would be an amendment to that zoning ordinance, that master plan for the site.
Okay.
So it's not an automatically they get that. There's still a process they have to go through, planning commission and council.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand that because it is kind of sometimes perceived as a change in zoning, and now it will permit a whole host of different things that could happen on that property.
Yeah, it is a change in zoning, but it gives the city, it's not so much carte blanche as the current zoning ordinance. They can do whatever they want on that site as long as it meets our current standards. With the PUD, there's more review by the city. It's that specific plan that the site is tied to.
It
Okay.
becomes really set in stone at that point.
Okay, and you had mentioned that the city would like to move to increasing the density to 1.0 versus the current 0.5 for office use space. Is that in any way hinging upon a PUD, or can that same thing be accomplished through other means, like when we do the comp plan review, or?
It could be by other means. We could increase the FAR of the existing POD district.
Okay.
To allow more density. Yeah, it wouldn't have to be just through PUD.
Commissioner Hobbs?
Hey, Carrie, could you pull up the graphic that has the Southdale sketch plan that Mick did to the south? So I guess my question is, you know, the kind of block structure that was contemplated with Southdale, is that something that was discussed on this site?
It was. And that's where they came up with these roads going through to kind of break it up, and then also this piece here.
Right. But it still seems not as the same kind of blocks that we're looking at in Southdale. I mean, if you just go south, it's Southdale Center, so that's kind of changes how we were looking at having those relatively small blocks in Southdale from a kind of a planning unit perspective.
Yeah, the existing structures make it difficult.
A
So
lot
they had
of those
they had
existing
to-
structures, I looked at that too, and it seemed like a lot of the existing
Yeah.
structures are
Kind of
there. so
stopping. Yeah. Okay.
It's not a complete wipeout.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else for Carrie? Thanks, Carrie. The applicant like to give us a overall concise presentation of what you're proposing here?
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission, staff. I'm Bob Erickson, Development Associate with Wildermere. I'm responsible for pursuing and achieving entitlements for developments of this nature. Mr. Doyle wasn't able to be with us this evening. Some of you may be familiar with Dennis Doyle as a native son of Edina, and he apologizes. His philanthropic nonprofit had a long time scheduled event this evening that he and his wife Megan were chairing, and he just wasn't able to modify that scheduled event. We've been working closely with city staff for a lengthy period of time, and with the city's authorization, we have also met with the Mick Johnson consultant for the revisioning process. So we're trying to align and follow the direction that's been set by the significant amount of work that's been done in that plan. Earlier this week on Monday, we held a neighborhood meeting attended by 43 residents, primarily residents from Point of France, as you might expect, and in the neighborhood immediately west of Southdale Office Center and immediately west of Valley View Drive. We have brought together a development team that is quite familiar with projects of this nature, and they are as follows: DJR Architects, and you'll hear from Dean DeVos here in just a moment. BKBM Civil Engineers. Sunday Engineering will be doing and is responsible for all the surveying on the site. SPAC, who I think some of you probably are familiar with, will be doing the traffic and parking study that would come if we get the positive response to our proposal. And Farber is the landscape architect. So that's our team. And they're very familiar with Edina, and we've intentionally selected that team because of the knowledge and background that they have in dealing with development, particularly along France Avenue. Also want to mention that Mr. Doyle currently owns and controls about 700,000 square feet of both industrial, commercial retail, and professional office at several different locations. Mr. Doyle also is the co-founder of Tradition Bank in the Centennial Lakes. You may be familiar with that as well. Dennis always tells me how proud he is of being on the 1970 Edina State Champion football team. So if he were here, he would say that, so I feel compelled to share that historical reference with you this evening. We've really appreciated the direction that we've received from staff to date. And it's been a good journey for us to date, and we're looking forward to your input and your insight, your perspective, as we attempt to move forward with what we believe, and as Dennis has defined, a labor of love on his part as a commercial real estate developer. Also accompanying me from Wildermere this evening is Devin Doyle, son of Dennis Doyle. So he's vice president, and again, we're looking forward to your response this evening. And I just want to be very clear that the neighborhood meeting attended by 43 residents, they were respectful, attentive, and certainly brought to our attention some of the concerns that they have. And I'm sure some of those concerns you've heard previously, maybe during the Aurora project or other related projects that have preceded us on France Avenue. So thank you this evening. With that, I'd like to introduce our principal architect, Mr. Dean DeVolis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Dean DeVolis, TJ Architecture. And I'm just going to give an overview through the plans, a little more detail, and pick up some of the questions that you asked during the way on this. So you know where the site, oops, I just goofed that up there. Let me hit the, mind if you give me full screen? Sorry. I just closed it. Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, I got the cursor. Okay. So I'm just going to give a quick walkthrough through the project. Obviously, you know the site right here. The buildings that are scheduled to be turned on, these two low ones right here. This would be kept, which is the 6800 building, and 6600 building would be kept. Edina Realty and what I call the Crown Bank building. The heights would be no taller than what's on the site right now. So even though the housing's mentioned at 8 stories, because residential floors tend to have a lower floor height, that's why it's 8 versus the office building, which represents 6 stories or 7 stories as actual height on the project. This just shows the context of the area in pictures which you're very familiar with. Obviously today it's a very parking lot dominant zone, because when it was developed at its period with the idea, and Carrie mentioned it, buildings in the center, parking lots surrounding the existing dining zone actually encouraged that kind of development. Further went back from the street, the taller you can go, and thus you put your parking in front of the building and pull your building back, and so it became a very auto intense environment, as you can sort of see today from these pictures. This just shows the zoning, which actually Carrie covered very well, which were POD, and you can sort of see some of the new developments, POD, which office. You can see some of the new developments, which are going to PUD. This document sort of shows our bus stops and major points of intersection in here. So you get an idea of the main vehicle routes, where the bus stops occur, where the controlled intersections are. And sort of this is a pattern, we're starting to work off of and develop from, along with Mick Johnson's South Hill area plans. That's sort of the reference of sort of the grid that we're starting to build off of in terms of the area. Existing survey, just to give you a reference of the site as it is. And probably one thing to note, this site was developed in which there was no way to go from this side of the site to this side of the site unless you actually left the property, went on the France or Valley View, came around and back in again, because these two buildings and the Tamarind France basically cut the site in 2 halves. And so there was no internal circulation from here to here. You could walk within these buildings, but you couldn't drive across the site. So there was a lot of traffic that loops out and back in within the development. This document shows a grading, but really the idea, again, just to make the point of, you can see the black, the amount of asphalt that really makes up the site and the degree of buildings in proportion to the site. That's why its FAR today is at 0.3, because it's just a surface lot environment that was appropriate in the area, was developed back in the 60s. This sheet shows precedent, and sort of the idea is that this plan is really based upon. And we're looking at buildings which you may be familiar with, which is I call it the Vitamin Shop building, which is at 7th and France. The one you just approved on the other side is 7th and France, and then the Bank of America. What's significant about this is that the idea is that buildings addressing the street, buildings addressing the corner, buildings addressing the sidewalk. And we worked on this one, and the Bank of America start that precedent of addressing the street and developing sidewalks and start to transfer the area from what you saw in those previous pictures of the major parking lots where the buildings start to hit the corners. And the other thing we're showing is we're picking up on what we developed in the Bank of America, this wall, you can see it referenced here, and actually just collar the whole site where there's not buildings, start screening the parking lots, creating an edge, and developing landscaping along that. So we start to give identity, and then the buildings open up to the street in the corners. In reference to the ATM, this diagram shows it where the sidewalk is here, the landscaping, the wall, and the ATM stuck behind it. So part of that wall idea, and that's that condition here, is that we tucked it behind the wall to get it out of sight, out of mind, so that the pedestrian traffic can flow through and the ATM traffic is here behind it. So in reference to one question was asked. But again, these are the precedents that this is being built upon. This just gives an idea of the surrounding developments. You're all familiar with the Wick site, the Best Buy site, the Titus site, which is all housing, One Southdale, the affordable site over here, the medical office building, the Aurora, and then the three I referenced before is 11, 10, and 1, and the three involved with, again, the idea of addressing a corner and start establishing context of the street. Scale diagram to give you an idea of the scale of the land. You're probably familiar with the West End and St. Louis Park, Excelsior and Grand, and then the Promenade of France. It's about the same scale of area to give an idea of the size of the development in relation to what are, other Twin City prominent developments, to give you sort of the impact or the opportunity, the amount of land that's held together. So now onto the exact plan itself. This is a view of what 66 in France would look like. This is looking down on south on France. An idea of maintaining the boulevard that was basically talked about, or enhancing the boulevard, I should say, in the Southdale area plan is really a main concept of this, and addressing a corner and creating entrances into the site is sort of key, and then keeping the landscape buffer and then the buildings that go beyond it is really part of the main function. So to do a quick walkthrough and development, and I'll go through this, is obviously Bank of America, the retail, Tavern on France, and additional retail, this being phase one. And what we'd like to accomplish phase one is the retail, but also an enhancement of France Avenue. And the idea of making this intersection and this intersection pedestrian friendly and making enhancements on it. And the idea of working with the city and city funds to accomplish this part of France along with this front of our site to really start changing the character of the street. The other aspect we're looking at with Sister City is dealing with stormwater. Right now, the stormwater services in this area are inadequate, France is inadequate, and we want to sort of deal with all this to deal with water clarity, storm control, because the watershed of this actually goes into, the pond by the pool and obviously Lake Cornelius. So those are the two what I call public portions that we would be looking for assistance on to develop. Outside that would be entirely private development. The medical office building is the phasing, then the hotel, and then the residential component. This wall would extend around the whole site to collar it and give it definition. This is green in here, and Carrie, like you say, the parking would be underground below this in a green deck. So you're right saying, does parking come up there? Yes, but this would be green in here. This grove of oaks, savanna, would be preserved, and we'd like to make that a permanent easement and then really enhance this green edge. And the same with working with the city to make sure we enhance and maintain that buffer that exists in berm and fencing exists along the western edge of the site to keep that connection very clear. All new parking related to development would be underground in a deck. So the 1,000 new spaces that would come with this would all be structured parking. So, which would be primarily in this area and primarily in this area and below the hotel and office. So the idea is we want to add parking and reduce the surface lot. This is a key connection through, as Carrie described, this is a key connection through. It's to be both vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian. And then a minor north-south connection would connect this way through the site to start breaking down the blocks in reference why was the blocks not smaller, this savanna of trees in relation to the building would be disruptive. And so we thought these 2 points made sense to start that division in scale of site and start creating the plazas and pedestrian enhancements and connection to Southdale within the project. So what these series of diagrams shows is starting of that plaza, central pedestrian spine, and how these future components will be phased in terms of this will be actually a covered walkway that connects to a plaza that ties across the site and goes through, and then the green elements are boulevards that start to provide the green spine to it along those, and landscape nodes that would work with it, and plazas that start to take the parkland environment, start developing spaces where people gather, or retail that concur, where elements, so that this becomes a very easy developed to transverse, whether you're walking from the Cornelia neighborhood or within the development or from Southdale, another way to start having the ability to feel comfortable crossing this. And additional roads is an idea that traffic could be distributed more evenly through the site, where right now these intersections, which is 66 in France and 69th in France, carry all the traffic, so that there's more alternate ways for traffic to flow through to Southdale and vice versa in the other direction. And again, this just starts showing the vehicular grid, major and minor, how this would set up, and the service being tucked behind. And again, that development of starting to get more alternate traffic patterns or additional traffic patterns, again, to start creating more internal streets within the development. And then this is a pedestrian overlay that sort of corresponds to that. Again, pedestrian, bicycle, and the pedestrian spine along the perimeter that really starts to set this up and becomes really the link that hopefully Southdale and Simon creates a companion development. So you start to have a symmetry about France and the development of the boulevard and the nature of the site that would start coming together. This diagram really describes all the components to give you an idea of scale and new buildings. This is a Bank of America, and anything that's cream colored is new construction. The 2 retail buildings, medical office, and hotel and residential, and then the orange is the existing buildings. And then down here gives you an idea of the heights. So these are the existing heights of the present development. This is the proposed heights of the new building. So the idea of keeping it consistent with what's there today, which is a 6 to 7 story project, and sort of staying within that guideline in terms of future development phases on it. And again, this just shows a use diagram of the retail, the office components, the residential components that work with it, and the idea of the underground parking zones here, here, and here, so that additional parking is at a site, which allows more greening and enhancement of the site and more pedestrian components with it. So this is sort of the amenity package in terms of overlaying all those items I mentioned of boulevards, pedestrian connections, plazas, and sort of a representation of what these are going to start to look like with the major plaza at 66, enhancement of the Bank of America, and these connections, and the idea of really preserving this green collar on the west side of the site. So essentially, you provide first ring buffer and then the second buffer that's it here. So really keep this, the green edge, and the east side more the active edge within the development. Southdale area plan, as mentioned, these are access points, and these are the ones we want to build off of, which is key. This one here is a little redundant, and coming off of France, to have it so close, we sort of want to make this, these 4 points here are major intersections, and really start that weaving through the plan to make that connection. And again, this shows up the diagram Carrie mentioned, again, with these being our major focal connection points, and this being the minor east-west axis. That really continues through here in a pedestrian nature, so it ties across this way and develop the connections here, which starts setting up these additional blocks as Southdale develops on the project. So again, the view that Carrie mentioned, this is looking north towards France with the idea of really enhancing this boulevard. And hopefully this goes, there's plans to extend the promenade that Edina has right now to actually get it to connect to both to York and France, and this would be part of the enhancement. And these yellow trees or orange trees sort of show the secondary connections within the development, so you give an idea of the scale of the property. Again, 2 and 1-story buildings address France, and then the 6 to 8-story structures that'd be similar height to the existing building. This being the residential, this being the existing 6,800 building, otherwise known as the Edina Realty building, hotel component, and the medical office back here in the 6,600 building in that area. And then landscape, just again, sort of mentioned to say about how the landscaping hierarchy is going to be developed on the site in terms of preservation, enhancement, pedestrian connection, boulevard, all those components to start bringing green components into the site and start developing that structure. And again, these are examples of what we're trying to accomplish in terms of gathering spaces, crosswalks, site definition, flowers, and all those components to start transferring the site. Because really, the site really has 2 components to it. One is the eye view, but the other is the residents of France looking down onto it. And that was their concern, that you both deal with the present view and the above view looking down. That's sort of the idea of getting that kind of setup and creating gathering spaces within this pedestrian bicycle connections. And again, like I mentioned, preserving the existing growth trees, enhancing the existing landscape that's on there, because there's some good landscape to work with. It's not a blank slate, and sort of building upon what's established and worked on the site on that. And oh, this is the ones that are slow in generating. So is this there and the one that takes a while to come up? Okay, my apologies. So what's following this is really showing the preliminary civil water retention plans and so forth, which start to address how we're going to deal with the site and the grading and components like that. The site is a natural to do parking decks on because of the slope, because they'll be basically out of sight, because the site has a low point here and a low point here, so those decks will remain invisible to the public. And you can see the major underground parking areas here, here, and here. And then the idea of how we start developing a stormwater treatment plan that works with this to start handling that major component of it. And then phasing, which is sort of critical. Phase 1, Bank of America. Phase 2, the retail buildings, and really France Avenue, the medical office, the hotel, and finally the housing component as this occurs. And the reason why we phase this is to protect the parking that's there. If this went under construction all at once, it would be very chaotic to the existing parking and situation. So the idea is they want to bite it bit by bit, so there's always alternate parking areas within the development, so we don't push cars out of here and have them scatter around the neighborhood and elsewhere. So that's the idea of working our way through this over 5 to 10 years to allow that transition of the parking areas. And this is our neighborhood meeting, which Carl mentioned had about 43 residents. You can sort of see me here in my very active pose. But what was good about the meeting, pluses, and we had very good conversation. The positives people like was the idea of active uses, restaurants uses, pedestrian nature, connection. That they saw as a great attribute, that there'd be more to their neighborhood. The issues they were about is traffic, noise, in those components is, it's a change, and those are their concerns. And stormwater was a big part, because a lot of the Point of France residents mentioned the quality of their pond and issues like that. And obviously there's more issues, and I sort of give you a quick summary. And this meeting occurred Monday night. We sort of had a good, like say the neighborhood came out, we had a good probably 2 to 3 hour meeting and good comments and conversations, which is some of the feedback we're starting to incorporate in the plan. So thank you very much. We all stand for questions. So
thank you for the
appreciate
presentation. Any comments, questions in the presentation? Commissioner Hobbs.
Yeah, I appreciate all you're doing to try to lessen the amount of surface parking, but I guess I'm just wondering what's stopping you from doing more in terms of lessening the amount of surface parking. And I get also kind of, there's the short term and the long term, but I'd love to hear you discuss that.
So let me go back to the plan here. So as we start, no, this is one I get stuck on. So as we go through it, all new parking's underground, and we're a bit of a hybrid, because we made a presentation for Edina Realty, for example, and their first question is, where's our parking gonna go? Well, we still have that kind of aspect. And the conversation was, look, we're trying to shoot where we keep some of the convenience parking, because it's still somewhat of an outer area, but really start breaking it and scaling it down and reducing its impact. And that was the idea. And our FAR is at a 0.82 going from a 0.33. The reason at 0.3 is just a large amount of parking on that. And setting up the street pattern, what it allows is that beyond the future, meaning beyond this time horizon, depending, you may see more intensification occur as things evolve, but under sort of what I call the 10-year horizon, this felt like a good framework to start that transition from a parking-dominated area to a pedestrian and sales parking, but setting up the framework that allows that transition to occur, 20 years out to give that infrastructure. So you could sort of look at this as a work in progress. This being sort of the current forecast, because once you get beyond 5-10 years, you're really guessing, but enough that sets a framework to allow that to occur, but still keep in mind sort of the present nature of the area that's still somewhat auto-dominated. So trying to serve both, allow that transition to become more pedestrian-oriented as time goes on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I do recognize that we are in this transition. I do think people, 20 years from now, people are going to look back at, surface parking, and it's going to be, no one's going to understand why we're wasting that much space on surface parking. So I think the best we can do right now is planning for that transition to be able to accommodate higher density and higher efficiency in terms of a site. The other question is about the grove of trees. You mentioned you wanted to protect that in some form of an easement.
Correct.
How big is that?
It's this area, I'm guessing by looking at, that's probably a 2 to 3 acre swath in here of an oak savanna, which is original from before Southdale showed up or anything else. And this is sort of a key piece, and I got good credit to Wildermere. They did a major cleanup and what I call restoration of this, and we really made this a focus to maintain that, because it's probably some of the only signature, the old history of what this area used to be. And the fact those predate us and probably will survive long after I'm gone, it's a nice element to really keep and enhance and protect. So the idea is, whether we do a conservation easement or something to make sure this stays after all gone, I think is sort of a significant contribution of trying to keep that lineage of what the area wants to be and what it could be.
No, I agree. I think that's a great idea, and even going beyond just a conservation easement to protect it, but also think about as a remnant oak savanna and kind of what it is, some kind of restoration effort to keep it the way that it is and enhance it. Yeah,
absolutely.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Nemroff?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeVolis. Could you bring up your slide 17? I have a couple questions about a couple of your slides that relate to a couple of your slides.
Let me see which way 17. Was it the overall site plan? 15, oh, there's 16, 17.
I have a few questions about this slide. Let's see, maybe going, I'm not sure necessarily what direction, but.
So this is France here.
Right.
And then this is north, this is south.
I was thinking I was going to go left to right, but I don't know if I'm going to be that clever. So the first question is about your retail sites. Do you have comps in mind of other retail areas that you think this could end up being like?
So, just using the Edina example, the 2 buildings that I worked on either side of 70th, that was sort of the precedent. The idea of the building and the quality of the architecture is really what these want to be. That the idea is that it addresses the street, it's 2-sided retail, it has that kind of activity, but a lot of glass have transparency. That's really what these guys want to be, to really start setting up that kind of presence along France Avenue. And the thought is that, and what's good about this, in terms of this project, we've had calls from retailers that are not in the area. So it's not your standard Five Guys or Jimmy John's. We're getting unique, out of state, unique to the metropolitan area type of retailers that really want to have a presence here. So the combination of fashion and a bit of unique dine is really what we're looking at, which will sort of help enhance the Tavern in France to start building on that. So that's really the direction, and the market is responding positively in that way. So, I mean, literally, this could be filled immediately, but with tenants that we're not familiar with in the area, which I think is a good thing to increase the retail diversity and give France Avenue its own signature.
Thank you. My second question has to do behind where you have the cursor right now, the housing, the residential. Do you have an estimate as to the number of units that you think would go there?
70. So it's
70?
a relatively boutique project,
Okay.
Is the idea on that.
You know, earlier and elsewhere in your presentation, maybe it was more for the size than for the type of development, you showed that it was a similar, roughly similar to, say, West End and Excelsior on Main. You have much more expertise than I do. It seemed that those were a higher percentage of residential.
Correct.
Is there a reason why you're going away from residential and more towards office with this?
Part of it is part of it is that it's primarily an office park, and in terms of our study has been, in terms of what we realize, the marketplace is actually requesting the unique retail, and that sort of got proven out by the calls. The medical office component is growing Edina, and there's actually tenants that are waiting to land on France Avenue. I mean, one thing about France that it's becoming is a medical alley, which I think is a good thing. And that trend is beginning with, you see it around the hospital, and it's starting to spread south along that. A hotel, if the market holds, is a good mix to support the existing office and a residential component we thought was appropriate. The other reason we didn't go crazy on, let's say, that density, and let me go back to this slide, which is in the beginning. If you look here, there's 1,100 units of housing being built, and it's apartment housing being built around Southdale. This being one Southdale, this is a housing, this is housing, this is housing, and then buyer leases beyond here. There's a big chunk of inventory in the market. So we thought that the housing market is, in the apartment housing market's pretty well taken care of. But in terms of others, but we wanted a housing component as a mix, but to go that heavy in light of all that's been approved, and these are all approved projects, I think would be starting to push the market too thin. And some housing was a good balance, but we wanted to complement what's being developed, not compete against it. So that's why we didn't go heavy housing. Part of it's the market, and part of it what's been established already.
Thank you. My final question on this slide has to do with the office, and that is if you have any vision as to the level of amenities that you'd want to put in these offices to drive it more towards a Class A office, or maybe fewer amenities like a B. Has there been given any thought to that?
So this is Class A. So one thing I forgot to mention, within this part, we're going to do full fitness club. That'll be either part of the hotel or the office. We plan to upgrade the amenity package of the whole development. This building here containing the fitness component, spa. So really we're looking at a Class A environment in terms of this new building here and enhancement of the existing building. So we're looking at adding amenities, adding more options of food, entertainment, housing, those components, connecting the site in a pedestrian nature, so you really have something that offers those aspects of a community. So, this project of these two buildings were a very good start. 6,800 and the 600 building were sort of the class of its own at the time. So we really want to sort of one-up that and keep these buildings performing as very respected structures and enhance it to keep it going well into the future.
If I have to give you any feedback, my only feedback on this is I'm fairly positive towards the height issue. I think you're handling it very reasonably. Can I ask questions on this slide, Mike, or should I defer for a while? Slide 34 in that case. I had
Okay.
a couple questions on slide 34.
Let's see. 34. Uh-oh, I'm in the dreaded no generation zone. It's those engineering drawings that eat all the capacity up. So anyway, go ahead and ask your question. Hopefully it'll pop up, which
Okay.
is, I think, yeah, here it's generating.
Oh, that's cool. So slide 34 is essentially your slide where you describe the phases of the project.
Correct.
And I think that's a good idea for a lot of the reasons that you said. But one general concern, obviously, that we will have is just the traffic impact of the as-built property. One thing that's coming to my mind as I'm seeing more of these developments, including the Bank of America development, including the Aurora development, is the impact on traffic during construction. And one thing I would suggest is that we think more about that as a city, as a developer, that as a developer, that if you were coming forward with this, that you think about the duration of the development and the impact on the roads during that development, and that we, as a city with you, think about ways to alleviate that. For example, for the Bank of America development, my opinion is that right now, going west there, if you're coming off, what is that, 68th Street?
Yep.
And if you want to go west, it becomes a problem. Then you're shooting everybody over to France Avenue if they want to go west on 68th instead. Now they have to go north on France. And I think this is a nice idea for development. If anything, I share Commissioner Hobbs' concern about, wow, 20 years from now we're going to wonder why we aren't doing more density. But I think this is a nice upgrade in the density of this property. But during construction and post-construction, I think that we should give clear thought to what the traffic impact will be, and if there's any way in advance of the construction to think about how to alleviate that. For example, and I'm no traffic expert, and I'm sure there's a lot of issues, but this, at some point you're going to be impacting 66th Street, which is a major artery. Is there a way for thinking out of the box, not making a recommendation, because this might be a dumb idea, but just thinking, is there another road, say 65th, where if we enhance 65th, we could alleviate the pressure that's going to result from construction on 66th.
And your point's well taken.
I do have a comment on the
sorry.
69th. That's not Bank of America construction down there. Natural gas.
Yeah, that's nothing to do. All the construction now is
Okay.
I'm just pointing out, and
Gas
so
company.
the city's been getting a lot of
grief.
for a lot of things this summer, and a lot of them have actually been natural gas upgrades that haven't been,
Oh, that's the gas company.
yeah, anything to do with necessarily the city or a particular
Thank you.
development.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just pointing that out because, to your point on the construction, I don't see, assuming France goes ahead with the boulevard things, but I guess I wouldn't see much impact to the rest of the roads here. Would there be?
Well, you
During
have like the
construction?
Aurora construction, that's narrowing 65th.
What we have, the luxury of this, that Aurora didn't have,
You've got
we
a lot
have
of
land to stage
Yeah, you've got a lot of
on
land to
site.
stage here. There's no staging at 65th.
Aurora,
That's a good point.
Aurora went curb to
Yeah,
curb,
and
basically.
And especially how they're phasing it, they're going to be able to kind of jump around too.
Oh, thank you. That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I just don't see a huge amount beyond this site. I mean, yeah, there's going to be times, but I don't see a huge amount like shutting down Valley View Road or shutting down France,
Oh, good.
unless that the France Avenue, again, back to if it gets modified by the city for a boulevard, that's a different discussion. But like 66, I just wouldn't see them on there, or Valley View obviously there's going to be more traffic as they bring.
Post-construction.
Well, traffic to bring materials onto the site, but I wouldn't see that there'd be huge lane closures here because they have all that room within the site. That's, you
No,
guys can,
and you're absolutely correct, unless the gas company shows up
I'm a
again.
construction guy, so
we
that's
should
like,
be
how do
okay.
you do this stuff?
Yeah, and we are going to write in our specs in terms of where the construction enters the site, how it gets there, the hours. I mean, that's going to be prescribed as part of the bid in method, because your point is taken, how do you manage construction the hours, the routes they take and all
Yeah,
that,
it's-
so
it's-
that
it's
we
still a big
do
deal.
keep it controlled. So,
That sounds great. That's, thank you.
thank you.
Those are all the questions I had about this developer's presentation.
Commissioner Olson?
My turn. Hi. Okay, so I'm kind of agreeing to where the parking, and when I look at this, are you adding 1,000 beyond what you're required?
No, because
Okay.
we're adding density, so we're staying, you got to strike a line, you want enough parking, but we're actually tightening it up gradually. We're adding 1,000 beyond what's on the site today, but the 1,000's being added is all structured parking.
And so have you figured out what according to the city code, what you would be required to provide?
We're within the code, provided we get some minor variances for mass transit, things like that. So we're staying basically within the goalposts on the parking.
All right, so you're not providing more than you require?
No, we're cutting it conservative within the code, but conservative, because the last thing, if we overpark this, we sort of destroy what we're trying to do. And then we start taking away the density, the green spaces, and that's what we don't want to
Right.
sacrifice.
No, I don't want you to do that either. It just seems like it's still very parking centric, and I know through your presentation, you were saying how you've added green, and I'm really not seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing more, adding buildings and density, which I like, at this site, but I guess I was just, I'm still a little concerned. I think can be more done to this to add, so it's not all just parking lots and.
No,
And not that I want, again, I agree, in 20 years, I think it's going to be sooner than 20 years, we're just not going to need all these parking stalls. And so normally what I used to say, don't build all the, surface and start adding structure, and I'm starting to think, not even doing that. But it just seems still too heavy on the parking, and that there could be more.
and if the market
Creativity
evolves
done.
faster, it'll move faster in that direction.
Yeah.
You're trying to forecast present circumstance, future circumstances, try to shoot a line saying it'll evolve more dense, it'll be less parking centric. How fast do you implement it, that the tenants accept it, that the marketplace accepts it, and try to set a timeline. I hear you directly, if it evolves faster, then this would evolve faster.
Yeah.
You're taking your best guess of the crystal ball and how to lay it out. And the phasing sort of allows that as we work through it. The opportunity may come of more within it, but right now, sort of based on, what I see in mass transit trends and stuff, this is like the best guess. But the idea of the infrastructure of the roads through here is that process can continue on, and the densification can continue on after we're passed, because we're building the scale in the property allow that to occur. Hence, that's why the internal roads that I mentioned gives that opportunity.
Okay. Well, just, again, this is a sketch plan, so if you do move forward with this, I would like you to put a little bit more thought
Okay.
into adding more green space, maybe reducing some of the surface parking.
Okay.
And there's opportunities, I think, to take advantage of that now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Also, I was just going to say that, ask what the distance between the two access points are.
Through this point here.
I'm sorry, along France. I'm pointing to this thinking. you
Oh,
can see
sorry.
it.
So, sorry. So, in here, and I'm guessing that's about 300 feet, and that's about 300 feet. These represent the existing lights that are on France Ave right now.
Yep.
What's tricky about France is it's a county aid road. And so this is not a Edina road. And so,
Yep.
And this is where I'm going to be looking at planning commission and council give help, because the county historically and still is wants to create more throughput on here and eliminate curb access and eliminate any kind of driveways or stops along France.
They want to make it Highway 100
They want to
light.
make Highway 100, and what it'll do, if that occurs, it'll start to destroy the idea of the pedestrian nature of the street. And that came up on some other projects we're working on. And so what's critical is that the city weighs in heavily in terms of influence the county and the future direction of France Avenue, because right now their forces are to eliminate more curb cuts and bring more throughput of traffic, but the more you do that, the more you destroy the idea of having retail, pedestrian nature,
Right, no.
and things like that. So the idea of making this a major intersection, make this an intersection along say 66 and 69, it slows the rate of traffic. It allows more pedestrian crossing, but doesn't destroy the capacity, which is what the county looks at. So the idea is to try and get a hybrid of getting really strength these connections. A additional one here, I don't think politically will get past Hennepin County. This seems like a rhythm that I think we can win the battle on in terms of breaking up traffic and providing those cross points to work with to change the nature of France.
Right. Well, again, I kind of agree with what Commissioner Hobbs was mentioning, how, when he was first asking where we see our master plan that we've been looking at for the Southdale area.
Oh, yeah.
That slide that you had was working
Oh, this one?
well
Sorry.
for me.
Okay.
Or was there a bigger one? Or that one? That's one fine. But, you know, that's where we also have, you know, the potential. I know you have some buildings in the center of the site, but I think there's still some potential between those two main access points to look at. Maybe it's a pedestrian crossing or something to go into that site from France. Again, I'm pointing to this and you can't see, but
Yeah.
where it's kind of like the more of the little like
They
orange.
had a pedestrian here on Mick Johnson's plan. I think it was here.
Yep, right there.
But what gets tough is I'm doing this as a major pedestrian connection, this is a major pedestrian connection, and to add one here, that's going to be a tough battle. We won't get there. I got to be honest with you. I get what you're trying to do, but to throw this one here when the one next door is probably 100 feet away, it won't fly. This, in my belief, we can really defend and defend fiercely. If we add this one,
Right,
that's
not
a tough.
not necessarily a connection across, but you could reflect that on your site
Yeah.
somehow. I know you have that building, but it's being, you know, that center building is being removed, and it seems like you'd have some flexibility to still maintain
Look.
a center spine through the
Okay.
site. And again, I'm just
No, understood.
sketch plan.
No,
I would
thank
like
you.
to see something more because it just seems like this site isn't really a PUD and it doesn't really reflect what we're trying to do as much as we would like to see, or I would like to see,
Okay.
I'd say. And then as far as the building and the heights, I would like to almost, I'm fine with the heights, but I kind of would like to see a little bit more variety of heights and not all the same.
I sort of self-regulate, get caught
don't go
on this
that
thing.
direction.
I self-regulated the heights, but I want to go back to that one plan, so hang on, let this generate
Joanne,
through.
I was going to mention that too, and I hate to say it this way, but when you go back to that plan, it looks like a public housing complex.
It's just all boom, boom, boom.
It's all,
straight.
I mean, when you look down at that, that came to mind for me. I probably shouldn't have said it that way because it's not.
Yeah.
We're not,
No, but
that's not what we're doing, but.
But your point is taken that if there was some flexibility, and so I sort of said you date them, but if this could be a little higher here and a little difference there, I'd be okay with that. But, the idea, can I cheat past a little bit, if this ended up being 10 stories, this was, this is 8, so there's a little bit of variety. I get what you're saying. I sort of just took that height as just a date and established discussion with to see where everyone felt, but I basically support your instinct of giving some variety of heights within this, so.
Right, thank you. And then just as far as my last comment, and I can pass it on, is also just the variety in the buildings. I know that we've been seeing a lot of you here, and you propose great buildings, and like you mentioned down on 70th. But I would really like to see, and I know you don't have anything to really show us, but different style. I just don't. I know I still want to see the high quality that you bring, but I just don't want it to be the same all along France.
And they will be. This was more of a massing diagram, get a feel, and you'll get more intimacy within these buildings as I bring them through for final review.
I lied. I have one more quick one. But I just also really, if you could just look at France on your side to really add more. Again, maybe that gets into some of those parking stalls, but to bring in more of the pedestrian and the boulevard feel on your site, not necessarily just on France.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I agree with most of my compadres here. I just had to reiterate on on the building heights, I think, if I were you, I mean, I don't know if it'll, as an option at least, you know, how do you mix that up a little bit to make it more interesting look along there? And then the other thing is and I think it's been mentioned before, kind of those two parking lots out in front, adjoining Tavern on France. I mean, to me, those just scream for a building. I don't know on what plan it is or whatever, maybe longer term, but to me, it just gives, back to the parking comment, you know, we're just giving you're leading with a parking lot on both sides of your complex in a way. And so that's my 2 cents. So I would be, you know, at least with a little more density even, and a little more variations in heights for the building to make it more interesting. And then also, you know, kind of, I like what you've done with the pedestrian walks and the car, you know, I think you're working through the circulation. I would say though, and maybe part of it is just because you have existing buildings, but don't make it too complicated either. I mean,
That's why
you
I
know,
sort of.
I know it all looks good on paper in a way, but when you actually drive it, how does it make sense for that? And you know, we want to make sure it's the pedestrian pieces, but at the same time, and you want it too, I'm sure, is, you know, make sure circulation works on this entire site. Two more comments. Have you, you know, back to the neighborhood behind here, what have you done or what are you proposing for, I don't want to say screening because that's the wrong word, but maybe it is, you know, are you planning more vegetation where you can all along those pieces? Have you approached the city for more in the boulevard, or, you know, making sure that the right of way across the street even has, I guess, to its full potential, so to speak, with that? I kind of looked at, you know, is there any other nodes that go into the neighborhood? I'm not sure that there are.
It's just this.
Yeah, so, you know, there's really no, you know, I was thinking more pedestrian from that neighborhood, but in reality, with they have the fence and those things and all the lots, you're probably not going to get that too much.
So in terms of your question, absolutely, because the idea is enhancing this, the boulevard, and then the existing berm. So you sort of build up layers of greenery, 1, 2, and then 3, to really start building up that layering. Because what's good about this site, and then Commissioner Hamilton mentioned it, there was good planning to start with. So we had the buffer, so there's good bones to the project. There's some mature landscaping to work with. Valley has a boulevard that could be enhanced. We have the oak savanna, and we sort of started the idea of this wall and sidewalk detail that would go around the site to start developing, and then additional landscape to start developing that layer of screening for exactly what you're talking about. So the idea is when we talk to the city, we do looking at enhancement of France and enhancement of Valley View and 66 to really start bringing those streets into what I call the public domain, because right now they're sort of there, but there hasn't been any real development of those surrounding streets for a while.
I think you want to be more open on the France side because
this wants to be
that wants to be open,
Correct.
Not necessarily with parking lot, and then on the back side, I think you're, you know, for lack of a better term, more hidden in a way because that's the back entrance, and obviously you have residential directly across from that. I think those are, like I said, I think most of my fellow commissioners had a lot of my comments, so I don't know, Mr. Hamilton?
A couple things, if I could. That Oak Grove piece is a unique amenity, and you appreciate it, but I don't understand why it's surrounded by parking. We've got a spa there that could look into that grove. You've got a hotel that my sense is would much prefer, instead of being the last car in the lot, to have the view of the Oak Grove. The spa could have the view of the Oak Grove. So to find a way to make it, to acknowledge how special and unique it is. We're going to move that spa about 13 different places.
But no, you're right. It's actually was sort of meant to be here to tie into this, so the trails and stuff. But I get what you're saying.
Go ahead and move your cursor to those corner islands and see that those are the last spots that you'd pick, and yet they're the best view of the grove.
Yeah.
So that's one piece.
Okay.
Another piece, since we're moving the hotel and spa, it might as well, it could also move to the parking lot adjacent to the tavern. One of the delights of the tavern is that outdoor dining piece.
Right here.
And what the outdoor dining piece talks about is all of the site amenity pieces that you've showed in 19 and 25 and 26 and 27. Lovely, lovely urban places. And we've harped on parking enough. But we can't show those slides and still know in our hearts that what we've got is parking lots. We cannot do that. We can show one or the other, but we cannot show both. So let's err on the side of making it as urban and less rural office as we can. We're all acknowledging that that's the direction that it's going. So at least in some, and you've done that, I think, beautifully with the medical office building. Both the north and south bookends of the site are urban. They meet the street, they respect the corner, they respect the pedestrian, they mark the site. So how do we do that throughout the site? I think those are beautifully done, and those are the new pieces that you can control. One more piece, the stormwater amenity. You're in the heart of downtown Edina, stormwater problem city.
Yeah.
And you're handling it, but you're handling it through civil underground. It seems like as the Oak Grove is an amenity, here's a wonderful teaching tool that you can use to show everybody. Here's where the water is, here's where it goes, here's what it does, here's how we use it, and make it part of those pedestrian events that happen. Because you got a ton of water on that site,
Yep.
and it all has to go somewhere. What else have I got? One of the pieces, I think, in the long run that might be fun to think about with the city, you've just listed the 1,100 new housing units that are there, and that this won't be housing heavy, but it will be amenity heavy. And it will have new retail, it will have new dining, it will have new urban amenities for your office clients, but also to attract others. How is it physically that you get those 1,100 new urban sorts of dwellers in those apartment buildings to your site? How is it that the city and Metro Transit and everybody else can help get them there without everybody having to drive 4 blocks to have a hamburger and a beer?
And I think part of the answer is coming when we talk to city staff, which I think you're probably aware of. They're very interested in taking the promenade,
Yes.
that exists through, bring it up to the face of South Hill and split it, that there's promenade west, I'll call it promenade east. And the idea, at least this connection, under present day, at least starts to develop that linkage, and Edina being that prime being the first move, because Simon, eventually what'll be key is how this starts defining, because that's going to be how you transverse this. That may be a ways off, but the promenade could be more of an immediate type of factor, because if it comes across, comes up 69th, runs along France, and the same appears York, and then reconnects, that I'm sort of looking at as that beginning of what you're saying, that piece to start that idea that all these housing units that's really sort of exists more on the east side of Southdale right now, outside of the Barleys, using the promenade as the beginning of that linkage piece that people feel comfortable start transversing the area.
My point, if I had one, is that you have a big site. It's a wonderful site. It's a key site. You can help be a driver to imagine the future. And to move that promenade, you and I would walk that promenade in a minute today.
Correct.
And go to tavern and have a beer, and that would be grand. I don't know that I'd do that in February.
True.
So how might we do that in February? How might we encourage people not to get in their cars? What sort of trolley? What sort of transit? We've got bikers that are here. Just be aware of that in all the pieces that you play with. How can we do that? Because you've got a whole new city of residents that are brand new to that part of Edina. How can you take advantage of them and they take advantage of you?
And you're right, it's a big deal because we're in the middle of this transformation.
And
This
you
might
can
be
be
the
a
most
driver
dramatic
for that.
piece. Yeah.
You can be a driver for that. And we can support you, or at least try to, in how that happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I say, maybe we didn't mention, but how important this site really is to Edina, kind of to your point. And I think it came up in the Southdale discussions. There was 3 or 4 or 5 sites that, because of where they're at and the potential for development at this point, really are the key ones in this point in time. And I think this is really one of them in that sense because of where you're at. And then, as Commissioner Hamilton just mentioned, how do you want people to be here? Why do you want people to come here? And all those dimensions and what it could be within this area versus a lot of the parking lots it is right now. So I just have one last point is, do you have Mayor Hovland, do you have a new home for him here, or how are you going to do that?
He stays in his office all comfy. With
Okay,
his chair on the
he's
right.
phased,
No.
whatever.
So we're keeping, and one thing I give credit to Wilmer, they've talked to every existing tenant and across the board, they've been very supportive of this transformation, which is a good thing because these are tenants that were used to a suburban office park with parking lot, and they like this transition that's occurring, including Jim. So far, so good.
Commissioner Hobbs, do you have some?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on one thing. I really like what Commissioner Hamilton was saying, and thinking about, again, this unique natural amenity you have in the Oak Savanna, and then thinking about water features that you could incorporate as part of the stormwater treatment to really make this a destination. You're going to extend the promenade to something that's going to draw people to this site. I think you have a unique opportunity to do that. So I would certainly encourage that because this is a one-time shot for really to be able to do something like that.
I agree.
Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. Pretty much everyone hit everything on the head, I feel like. But yeah, to echo kind of the balance of the natural amenities you have in back, it's kind of hidden also from everyone that might be traversing the future promenade or even France or even that pedestrian covered walkway. I don't know how visible you'll see that or if it's even an explorable feature too, but that's something to consider and at least better uniting that pedestrian traffic from the neighborhoods coming through that street. There's no crosswalk that's identified there.
And that was supposed to be drawn. That's going to be a key piece of making this link and then working out that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. As important as these are, this has, when I say, the same priority.
And so I don't know how much the plan is for preservation of that oak grove, but I mean, even a very, rugged, kind of more natural path that kind of goes through there for residents or people that, know the area more to at least navigate to the pedestrian spine areas. And then again with, having that just to pair some other, water features on site, there's going to be a large supply of water. So to expose it, not necessarily to the extent that Centennial Lakes does, but to at least make us aware that, you're doing something with it and there's a way to make it beautiful too. Whether it's, kind of a creek feature that, circumnavigates with the wall or the collar effect or something of that nature. And then also, I guess my big thing too is just looking at the site. I mean, it's a great plan and everything's so very well thought out, and the preservation efforts are very commendable. But to echo some of the stuff, if I'm at Southdale or if I'm walking along France or that future promenade, I want to be drawn into the site the whole way you traverse. And I see that the corners by Bank of America, and especially the northeast corner of the site by the plaza, there's just this wow effect. I think that I don't necessarily see that, or you could take advantage of that in those 2 other connections on the east side. And seeing that as you're walking, it does seem that you have these retail and service opportunities kind of more on the southern side and the northern side, and it works for the current users of the office buildings or residential or hotel, but there's kind of a disconnect between those, and then you have tavern there, and like I am definitely a proponent of more density and just filling that, more of that surface parking there with service or retail or something to kind of create this gallery effect of when people are walking either from the inside or outside. You're still going to see the tall buildings behind, know they're there, but to at least have more opportunities to kind of draw people in. Because the covered plaza and parking, I don't know realistically how much just any user would actually go into the site to, traverse that pedestrian spine versus, just walking down France. How would they know to like go in, and what draws you in about an office setting if you're just an ordinary pedestrian, unless you knew there was maybe a trail going through, this oak grove that's kind of unique. So just more opportunities to just see some more green space and more connectivity for just any pedestrian, both residents and users of Southdale, to just give people kind of checking out the site.
No, I appreciate it. And our next overlay, the water, we do want to enhance the water, and that's absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, 'cause I just don't see any exposed water, and I think there'd be some awesome opportunities.
At this level, we didn't put in, but when we start refining it to start developing that network, that will be sort of the future iteration. And, like we said, as density increases in time, whether it's today, as these corners fill out, that's why we set up this infrastructure, allow those interactions to occur. So I agree with what you're thinking and what you see in this. So thank you.
What else? Commissioner Olson? Lee, excuse me.
That's right.
One of you.
You are referring to this as the existing tree grove to remain. I hope that's the case. Just looking at the plan, it appears that probably about 30% of that tree grove is going to have to be removed. So that's just a comment.
Yeah, it's not. It's
Okay.
not, nothing's being touched on that.
And then in the planning of it, I think it might be helpful to think of it as you are actually, it's interesting that you mentioned Excelsior and Grand and West End, and I think what I recall from those areas is that they are walkable in the sense that it feels like there's miniature little blocks with
Correct.
buildings on it. And rather than plunking buildings down in a sea of asphalt, maybe it has to be planned so that you are actually making the little city blocks first and planning where the streets are and putting sidewalks on either side of it. Now it feels like there's a reason for a pedestrian to go through. I think to designate pedestrian paths, but really they're not much more than a line of trees with a little bit of grass and a sidewalk next to it, does not necessarily work as well. So that's just one approach, and I think everything else has been said. So I do have some concerns for the height. Some of the things that go along with residential being that high is that the current office towers, as we know, are close to that height, but they're not there during the night time. And so lights or views from people who are there more of on a continual basis versus just a periodic business hours. I do know that they can look down on the homes right over that berm, and that obviously those homes can look up and see into that. So that is something to consider, and I will have to weigh that as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? A lot of discussion here.
If I could,
Thank you very much.
If I could just interject briefly, if you could stay. I just want to respond to a couple of excellent questions that were raised. I'll go quickly with regard to Class A. When Mr. Doyle relocated from his corporate headquarters in Minnetonka, he wanted to create a showcase to show future tenants what our expectations were for tenant improvements. So you're all welcome at any time to stop and traverse to 5th floor of the 6800 building. We've had many people touring that. Many of our tenants are touring that to see what our focus will be going forward for creating this as a complete Class A space. Currently, we're renovating all the bathrooms in the entire facility and bringing them up to a 21st century standard. And that's just the first step in many that we've got planned in our reinvestment in this property. With regard to the parking decks that were alluded to, I just want to reemphasize, it was brought to our attention at the neighborhood meeting, I thought appropriately so, that the parking decks will emulate in large measure the Centennial Lakes parking decks. Considering the lower level and how you traverse and enter that, where the city facilities are, there'll be a lot of similarities to our decks and that deck, for example. With regard to phasing, I think this is very important for me to share with you. We will not start, if we're granted approval through this process, we would not start the first retail building until Bank of America is completed and occupied. And all their construction materials are gone. Then we would start with one retail building, which will have underground parking. And when that is completed and occupied, we'd move on to the next retail building. So that's our approach and our process. So we don't take away the valuable existing parking to our current and very important tenants. It was alluded to, but I want to reemphasize that Mr. Doyle personally and our president, Ted Jokers, have met with all of our primary tenants. Edina Realty, for example, Crown Bank, just to name a couple, Tavern on France. They did that personally, and then our property managers have followed up and met with the majority of the balance of all of the tenants in our building, including those tenants that would be relocated by the removal of 6,700 and 6,750. In the pedestrian spine that was alluded to by Dean, I just want to emphasize that throughout that whole spine, to the gentleman's, Mr. Bennett's point, you're familiar with the Lunds Byerly's canopy. I'm sure most of you have, in clement weather, maybe in the wintertime, have enjoyed and appreciated that. That we will do a similar canopy in this spine so that it has a cover, it's covered, and when you access the parking deck below, which will be secure in some areas, especially the area where the residential will be located, we have this covered walkway so that you can work and live, if you will, in that immediate area in a connected manner. With regard to stormwater, I want to emphasize that we've met with Mr. Teague, the city engineer, Bar Engineering, who represents now 9 Mile Creek watershed, and we have every intentions to have pristine water coming out of this site and to accommodate the significant flow that occurs after a 5-year storm from France Avenue that comes into Valley View, right, and comes into our property. If Mr. Doyle were here, he would emphasize the importance of having a collaborative effort between the city and Hennepin County to remedy that flow, which is not being diverted away from our property, but we become the repository or the depository for that water. So we need to deal with that. We will deal with that. The comments from Point of France residents were not about our water. They were about the water from the parking lots at Southdale and the debris that comes floating into their pond from that site. And we have offered to work with them in conjunction with Simon and try to ameliorate that ongoing problem. Did you know the Dayton family built Southdale Office Center 40 years ago? And they provided the wooded area. And 2 years ago, I asked Kerry if he could bring out of cold storage the old records for this project, which you did. And I spent a day on the floor there working through those files. And I found the proof of parking that was agreed upon nearly 40 years ago for that woods. In other words, the Oak Savannah area to be left. And that we would get proof of parking for that, so that would never be removed. Earlier this spring, I engaged, through Kerry's direction, the city forester, a professional arborist, and we had 5 professionals spend 3 weeks trimming, remove dead, and all the buckthorn, some of which was as much as 3 or 4 inches in diameter, is gone. We have a treatment program now to ensure that it doesn't return. To your point, sir, to Mr. Bennett's point, there's a natural trail, wood chip trail through that Oak Savannah area now. I know Mr. Doyle plans on lighting that and having that for the residents, which will, for the first time in history, have a sidewalk along Valley View which is non-existent today. So on the Ken Roslin side, you have the sidewalk, but on our side, we don't. And now that would exist. And we see identified walking area, maybe a mile area or something where we could designate that as a trail for those that are employed at that location and the residents that live in that area. Appreciate your time this evening, and we remain interested, excited, and enthusiastic about the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all your helpful comments. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. So Carrie, up next is comprehensive plan update, is that right? Sorry, sketch plan is done, so I just you can certainly stick around if you want, but that piece is, as I mentioned before, there's not public input at this point on that.
Yep, City Council will consider the sketch plan at their next meeting on September 7th.
City Council's next meeting? Gotcha.
Thanks
Correct.
again, and we want to make sure that you can appreciate and we could visit our corporate setting, new corporate setting, but also that we'd be more than interested and respectful of your time and meeting and responding to any additional questions you might have going forward. Again, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, they could have stayed, but.
So this next item is more informational, some additional background. What I think we'd like to do, similar to what we did with the Valley View Wooddale small area plan, we created 3-ring binders for each member of the task force. We'll create that for each one of you where we can include these files and keep them all together. I think Jackie and I will put that together, and this information that we handed out tonight will preload that in the books, and hopefully we'll have them to you at your next meeting. So the information includes, that's included this evening is the charter that Chair Platter presented, maybe a month or two ago, just into our charter format. So there's nothing really substantive changes that were made. It's essentially that presentation boiled down into a charter. If you want to review it, provide any comments to me, should we add anything, let me know. We've also included the timeline, the background information that includes all of the chapters of the upcoming plan. And then the new item is I put together a summary memo of the current densities that are within our comprehensive plan, because we've had some changes over the last 5 years or so. So this puts them all together in one place. And this really is going to be the bulk of our work, is considering each of these land uses within those small area plan, those little mini plans within the comprehensive plan, and the Southdale area. So if you want to go through that, get familiar with the densities, start thinking about each of these nodes, what might be appropriate, just get familiar with it as we begin the process. I think what we'd like to do, and I'll discuss this with the chair, but bring this proposal to the City Council for their second meeting in September to get authorization for us to go out for an RFP, and then we would seek a consultant. So that's kind of the next steps as we begin to move forward here. And then we'll really be busy over the next couple of years. Any questions or anything you want to discuss?
Carrie, a link was provided to the Met Council site, and there was a link to preparing the comp plan, for planning committee. I mean, it was pretty, just what we needed. They are conducting workshops and seminars, I believe, at various facilities that they host for. But then they also mentioned that they would provide or come in and do these very same workshops. I know some of us maybe have been through, I haven't been through this, so I think I would certainly be interested whether I should pursue some of these subjects.
Yes, absolutely. If there's anything that you see that you'd like to attend, the city can accommodate that. If we would like to have our sector representative or someone in from Met Council, I think that would be a great idea.
Well, I think as I get in further, maybe I'll, but pursue both directions individually, and then maybe a group workshop just for here. So,
Sure, that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments?
I think a great idea would be if we end up, we just had a meeting that we got to cancel, is to take advantage of those meetings and use it for us as a group to, I mean, it's time on the books anyways, to kind of address some of these things that, or maybe have a chance. I'm not saying that we could actually know when we could bring in someone to speak, but certainly there's a lot of issues on the table that we could all talk to each other and learn a bit more and find out and address sort of some of the focus or objectives of us as the Planning Commission, where those areas are that we feel we're lacking a little bit of either knowledge, background, and maybe spend a little time sort of supplementing some of those areas. So I guess I would just propose going forward, if we do have those opportunities again, that we maybe start cultivating a list of topics or things that, as planning commissioners, that never seem to have the time to get to, might be a great thing to maybe just bring it up to Mike, the chair, or Carrie, and start just growing a list there. And then when those opportunities happen, we can have that time to discuss. Thought I'd just put that out there.
I was just gonna, I think you have on your timeline, 2016 on page 3. So if this is going to the council, it's gonna be 2018, right? Not 2016? Submitted to Met Council for review by December 31st, 2016? No, 20,
Correct.
2018, right?
Yes.
We're gonna
Good
really
going.
be
We'll begin in
busy.
2016.
Let's just do it. We can do it. Let's get it done. And also, I know Carrie, I brought this up, I think before too, but it's, you know, we always hear kind of these stories about what happened with the last comp plan amendment. And so are there lessons that have been learned or that we can keep in mind as we go through?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
excellent point. I think the lesson that we learned there is we need to have check-ins, kind of like what we've been doing, like with the Greater Southdale Area Study, is have check-ins with the city council, let them know what we're doing. We really didn't do much of that the last go-round.
Anything else? All right, correspondence petitions. I don't think there's any of those. Chair and member comments. I don't have anything. Staff comments.
I have a member comment, if I mind. I'm kind of new at this. This is, I think, the third sketch plan that I've seen. But the sketch plan was wrapped up saying, this is what we presented and now we're leaving. The sketch plan idea, and I want to reinforce this as much as I possibly can, it's my understanding the sketch plan is to come to us so that we can provide interesting, thoughtful, considered ideas that make it specific to Edina. And it's supposed to go away and be revised based on those comments. It was abundantly clear from the closing statement tonight that the proposal was the proposal. And if that's the case, then it wasn't a sketch plan. And I don't know how to reinforce that discussion. And my request would be, Carrie, that you're going to have further discussion with the developer. And my request is to be very, very clear with them that it was a sketch plan to be reviewed as a sketch plan. And that the ideas that were presented here weren't presented lightly. They were presented with great consideration, and they need to be incorporated.
I will and do, as I meet with developers after they go through this, oftentimes it's still very frustrating that they don't listen to what staff's recommending, what the planning commission's recommending, what the city council, you know, I can't guarantee them they'll make the changes.
Right.
Many developers have learned their lesson as they come in, and they get a denial on a project, you know, I do the best I can. You know, they hear loud and clear, and oftentimes the city council echoes your comments. They all watch and provide similar feedback.
Well, perhaps we need a lesson here then in how we need closing statements to wrap that up, because my sense was, and I could have read it entirely wrong, but my sense was that their closing statement was, the proposal you got is the one you're going to get next time. We had some very specific, concrete ideas that need to at least be looked at. And the response that comes back next time needs to say why we chose not to do those things.
In our experience with DJR and Mr. DeVolis, he oftentimes does make changes.
I know that he will. I don't know that he'll be allowed to.
I understand.
So, enough said.
Carrie, we had a discussion about the Lincoln Opus project, and my recollection was that this commission was pretty unanimous in some of our recommendations. How did that work out with the council? What was the result?
They did a lot of the information that you were looking for at your meeting, the additional elevations, the elevations that showed the grade changes, those types of things. They did submit, so the council had a clear package as to what the project was. So they did respond to a lot of your concerns. They did approve the project. It was a 3-to-1 vote. But the feedback from the Planning Commission, they did take and revise their plans and beefed it up a little bit.
So would we be able to access what they saw? Because we had some, I would still like to very much see the site section. I think
sure.
that we were, I'm trying to recall, but I think we felt there was not enough information for us to really, that's why we voted the way we did. So I was surprised to see that it was practically almost unanimous at the council level, so hopefully things were significantly addressed. Otherwise, you know, we always want to feel that we are all volunteers up here, but we do function as the Planning Commission, and I think as Commissioner Hamilton stated, it needs to be clarified what our role is and how the information that we put out there, the comments that we do, how are they addressed? How are they incorporated into the process? And as it goes to the council, if they indeed really are focusing on our report, our response, and understand that well, then we don't have that method or that feedback loop that tells us how did it all eventually work out and why something went a certain way. So I guess me personally, I would like to understand that a little bit better, but that's going forward.
Sure, I can send you the new package that they presented. It's online, you know, as you go to the WACHA meeting, you can take a look there. But as you know, your role is your advisory to the Planning Commission, so they take your recommendation and your comments into consideration when they're making their decisions.
What did they do with the affordable housing? I didn't watch the meeting, so.
They will be,
they'll be making a cash dedication of $2 million. And on that, well, maybe it was on the previous agenda, but the project at 45th and France, the little office, the bank, that was approved also.
That was on the previous agenda, wasn't it?
That was.
Staff, okay. If there's nothing else, I would take a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.